I just realised I haven't recorded all of that last session. Yeah, we missed it. Oh well. Yeah, that's what happens when I hit pause. Anyway, all right. So if you're watching, we've missed half the show, all about that, all about the Australian political landscape. Anyway, sorry about that. So shorter one this week. We'll do, we're moving on now to fallacies. So a bit of introduction about that. So the first 2/3 of the time we've been looking at, as I said, the sort of external relationship of texts to their context and understanding if something is left and right. What we now need to do is we're going to focus on, I'm just going to share that. Zoom, as you can see that all right, I hope. Yeah, so fallacies. I'll give these out. No, that's... One each. Oh, right, sorry, we want to. Ah, actually, no. There you go. Yeah, so in order to, one thing we can do in order to learn to think well is look at thinking badly. And it's like anything, it's like, you know, when I used to coach some tennis, you know, it's like, well, do this, but don't do that. You know, don't hit the ball behind your front foot. Make sure you hit it level with your front foot. Don't hit it too far ahead. You know, so there are do's and don'ts, as we say in English, do's and don'ts. So sometimes examining the don'ts can help you do something better. You know? So a kind of a negative strategy. And I think it can be quite effective because there are several dozen types of bad argument. And one of the websites I used to use quite a lot, I'll just write it down here, Nizcore. And just make it a bit bigger. Spell like that, if you can see it, Nizcore. I don't know if it's .com or .org, but if you write Nizcore and fallacies, you'll get a very nice webpage. I used to use it a lot when teaching in the TAFE diploma, because there are a couple of units on critical thinking there. Yeah, probably about 60 something different types of bad argument, and bad argument, not logical. You know, people assume A, therefore B. And if there's not a necessary link, and necessary, therefore, you know, absolutely logical connection between the two, that is fallacious. That's your adjective, a fallacious argument. Yeah? So most of these, when you look at them, some of them, well, most of them go back to the Greeks, and the Greeks were the, you know, very well-known critical thinkers 2,500 years ago, and they classified a lot of these arguments, gave them names. They don't necessarily have the Greek name now, but they discovered them. Some of them do. Some of them have got Latin shifted over to the Romans. Also, then they absorbed a lot of Greek culture, and we tend to have Latin names or English names attached to them. So we will learn some of their names, but the key really is to learn the problem and associated with them. And some of the names of these are very common. Like I said earlier, a straw man. So a straw man, somebody says, oh, that's just a straw man argument. That's quite a common thing in English. But if somebody said, oh, what's another one? You know, affirming the consequent. If you said, oh, that's affirming the consequent, people are going, huh? right? But if you learn philosophy, you'll know what that means. So my point is the names of some of these are well known and the names of others are not so well known. But it is worth knowing the names, because if you know I think it's like anything. If you know the name, it could be a single word or a phrase, it becomes a package in your head that you can then manipulate, and you can label, you can see something, you think, that's that, right? And if you know the name, it'll just give you that sharper tool, you know. So we will look at the problems themselves, but also the names. Some of them have got several names, and it changes a bit depending on what country you're in, America or other countries. We'll explore that stuff as we go. All right, so this is a bit of discussion time. So what we're going to do is to try to identify what's wrong with these arguments, with each line of reasoning. As it says, how is the reader trying to manipulate you? Or how does the author want you to feel? So like I say, a lot of them were, I think the term is discovered rather than invented, because they're out there and then people realize, oh, that's a problem, and then they label it. So the Greeks did a lot of that work. Yet 2,500 years later, people are still using them. So how come? If they're not logical and they're bad, why are people still using them? One of the key reasons is, and I think it's important in terms of identifying them, is to understand that the fallacies survive because they don't appeal to logic, they appeal to emotion. Most of them have an emotional component, which is quite powerful. That is the thing often that draws people in and convinces them. So you remember Aristotle's logos, ethos, pathos. So the fallacies are very strong on pathos and very weak on logos, on the logic. Yeah, but that's why they still operate, and why they're still quite common, and why they've endured, today. And marketers, again, back to Gruen and people like that, they will consciously use some of these techniques techniques of fear, or different kinds of fear of the unknown, fear of social exclusion, that kind of thing, to manipulate for product sales and so on. So, hey? Oh, yeah. FOMO. Yeah, that's right. Fear of missing out, FOMO. Yes, indeed. Yeah, so just that, I'd just like to introduce fallacies in that way, approach, think about how they're, as it says, how is the reader trying to manipulate or want you to feel? So they're not being logical necessarily, but they're using some other kind of technique. So what if we just do some at a time? Maybe, how many have we got in total? 12. All right, we'll do bunches of 6. Yeah, first 6. Shall we just in the group in the room? What if we just read those around? Denny, just kick off.
As everyone knows, leaders are born, not made.
Yeah. Sophia.
Students could focus on their courses in their major if all these useless English courses were cancelled.
Yeah.
Either we raise taxes or Social Security Fund will go bankrupt.
Yeah, and what I need to do, that is an error. I got this off a website. Can we just put the Social Security Fund? There's a bit of English grammar. Need to put work there. The Social Security Fund will go bankrupt. Yep. Cool. Okay, cool.
Providing nuclear plants to some countries is too dangerous. What if the plutonium falls into the wrong hands? You can say bye-bye to
LB.
ELB.
I don't know what it refers to. It must be some American thing, but maybe it's the name of a city or something. Let's imagine it's a city. Mm. Mm.
So if I can balance my checkbook, what can the Congress balance the budget?
Yeah. And the last one, playing sports makes people more aggressive. Look at all those fights in the bowling alley. All right, so we've got half a dozen there. And what I suggest you do, Zoomers, I'll make a group for you, a breakout group, and you can jump in there and discuss them in a second. Start with any one. Don't start with number one if you can't figure out what's wrong with it. Now, you don't have to know the name. Just if you can say, you know, what you think the problem is and describe the problem. If you know the name, sure, give the name, but then you're going to have to probably, others won't know that name. You're going to have to explain it as well, right? So explanation, description, naming, any of those or all of them for each of these. And see how you go for 10 minutes or so. And when one group looks like they've finished, we'll connect up and look at the results, what you think. Okay, so just over to you. I'll set up the Zoomers. You've got one room, you've got 3 people there. Ready? Jump into the breakout room. And if somebody in the Zoomer group can get that text up and share it with the others, that's going to be helpful. Jin. Sorry.
Hi, it's my first time joining this group.
Hi, no worries, Maggie. Good, welcome.
Should we start?
And you're with Jin. So, Jin, would you mind, do you know how to, if you've got that open, would you be able to share your screen? So Maggie, it's probably best if just, or Maggie, you know, you could share the screen, whatever. But it's good to have the text up in front of you now. There was someone else. I'm just going to leave the room and see who hasn't joined yet, because somebody's been left behind. If we can get that person. Who was it?
You need to unmute, John.
Yeah, you can hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. If Galina can't join tonight, so it'll just be the 2 of you. But if one of you can get up the document and share it, so you can both see it, I think that'll help discuss it. Jin, you're muted. You need to unmute.
Yeah.
That's better.
Feel like
So Jin, can you?
say, if all these users English courses,
I got a hard copy.
Oh, the hard copy, right? Maggie,
Hard copy.
have you?
I don't have any.
Okay, Maggie, have you
Material.
joined the Facebook group?
how to prove English.
Oh no, I just joined from the meetup.
Okay. I'll see if I can send you the document.
What did you say?
Um,
I'm
Fallacies
saying,
on that.
I don't know,
No, not the name, not the name.
for the part,
Hmm.
users English courses,
Yeah,
and there's no
That's
proof
going to
say
be
English
tricky.
is useless.
yeah.
So you mean useless is too subjective? Or?
Yeah, because there's no evidence in this sentence.
Okay.
I'll try and put it in. I'll see if I can put it in chat. Yeah.
Maybe you can put all these users, maybe. some
Okay,
of
I
these
have
users,
sent
not
that
all.
in chat to everyone. Can you see, identify the fallacy in your chat
Yeah.
document?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah.
Good. Okay, so if you open that up
There's different English course
and then
instead of other courses.
There's no other.
Yeah.
I have set up the sharing so that all participants can share. So if one of you could
Of course,
share
in
that,
nature, it's, as if there's only one.
Yeah.
it should be possible.
If there are other courses also useless, maybe.
I will share my screen.
Yeah.
So would you say it's a wrong causality?
So-
Is it a word for that? Causality?
Yes, that is a word. That's correct.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Great, Maggie, well done. Yeah, thanks. Good. Jin, you can see that all right?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, good. Okay, so start with anyone you want out of those six. Like
Cause and the result.
when they were being read out, was one of them you thought, oh, that's obviously not logical, and you had some idea why.
The first, as everyone knows, leaders are born, not made.
In here, it's like a debating nature and unnature.
Mhm. Number one.
Yeah, number one.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Like nature or nurture. Is that what you mean? Nurture. Yeah, we say nature or nurture.
Yeah.
I think some of the leadership qualities can be trained.
Yeah, true. And look, I think the point about number one is it's not so much the statement that the person is making. It could be about any topic. Leaders are born, not made. Focus less on that and look at the first, the problem or the
Everyone knows. No.
yeah, that bit, as everyone knows, that's the problematic bit. Now,
Five.
you know, there are three, or there are, kind of three questions in the title.
no
Have a look at
real
up the
connection
top.
between
What is
these
wrong
two
with each line of reasoning?
Yeah.
But also, how is the reader trying to, writer trying to manipulate, or how does the author want you to feel? So for this one, I think it's very much, if you think of what are they trying to do emotionally to get you to agree, because they could just they could leave off that first bit, couldn't they? They could say leaders are born, not made, or research shows leaders are born, not made, but the person says, as everyone knows. So what does that sort of thing try? What are they? What's the
Manage my household.
writer trying to do?
Fallacy.
They're exactly like, aren't they? So bad.
If the author want you to believe, maybe
Certainly,
a
yes.
certain people is born to be a leader.
Number six.
That is what they want, yes, but they use this trick. It's a kind of a trick by saying, as everyone knows,
Yeah. that's-
blah blah blah. We could say it about, so ignore,
Behavior.
in a sense, ignore the topic. I'm just trying to think of another one.
Just because some people are doing that doesn't mean all.
Yes.
As everyone knows, young people are left wing, but as they get older and wiser, they move to the right. So, you know, we could make up any general statement, and we add this, as everyone knows. So it's that thing.
And then the
That
second
is-
sentence, like, look at all those.
It is manipulative. It's engaging in a manipulation. What is it doing to you when you hear that?
And it's also oversimplified.
And
It's kind of like, you know,
This kind of the words for me, I always hear from like the election, similar, and also your workplace. In workplace, when someone say this, it's kind of like Like John, he is my buddy, right? And he is he is a leader like in this department, but I will want to promote him. And if you have
Oh,
some argument, I will say no, you know, leader our bond. And he is the leader in this department, but I'm pretty sure that he can also lead other departments as well, or remove him to the higher ranking. So
Mhm.
that's
Mm.
the kind of like I want to let people believe that he's not only success in this area, but also can be,
Right. You mean because he's a born leader
yeah,
in any area? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. I think again, Jin, you're focusing more on the topic rather than the first bit. This, as everyone knows,
Yeah,
that's the bit the writer is trying to manipulate us with. All right. If you can't get it, don't worry. We'll just move on to another one. All right. We'll come back. We'll review this one. But if you can, keep thinking about it. But probably move on to one of the other ones and see what else you think about the others. All right. Because I'll comment on the kind of answer. And when we all come back together. Okay. So jump on to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and see what you think about
Okay.
it. Yeah, catch you in a while.
You need to mute yours. I mute, John.
Sorry. Okay, I'll say that again. Sorry, thank you. I don't know why it automatically mutes like that. Yeah, the other group's finished, so we'll review and we'll see what they think and what you think. All right, time for discussion, review of the whole lot. Okay. Group, live group, face-to-face group. What did you think? Start anywhere you like, and each person can do one report on one.
So the first one.
Yeah, go for it. So, Sophia, yeah.
So the first one is that as everyone knows. So the speaker assume that everyone knows this statement,
Mm-hmm.
which is not true.
which is maybe someone don't know and maybe they are not agree, maybe.
True. If everyone knows it, why say it? Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. So it's not logical, is it? If everyone knows it, you wouldn't need to say it. It's an illogical thing. So why is it there? If it's not a logical purpose to this, what's the emotional purpose?
So because you will feel under pressure, the listener under pressure because you will feel like everyone know.
I
and
should know.
I should know.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, isn't
Do you
it?
call that rule of thumb? Or I don't know.
No, rule of thumb is a very general rule about something. Just a very general rough rule. If I said, look, as a rule of thumb, don't when you're writing, don't start with conjunctions like and or but. But that's a rough rule, because if you look at even very good writers, they can sometimes full stop, but blah, blah, blah for emphasis, you know, so it's a rough rule.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's a very precise rule, it's not a rule of thumb. So yeah, the point of this is it puts pressure on you, doesn't it, to, wow, how does it make you feel, Danny, if you don't actually agree with the statement? What's it forcing you to? Why do you feel under pressure?
So yeah, you feel like am I stupid or something?
That's right. Yes, it makes you feel stupid if you disagree. Yeah. So it appeals to that sense that we all have to some degree of conforming, doesn't it? The word conform, agreeing with everybody, being like everybody else, behaving and thinking like others. We don't want to be excluded. So fear of exclusion, fear of appearing stupid. Yeah. One name for this is every schoolboy knows. That's what the fallacy is sometimes called. Every schoolboy. So it's got a sexist element. What happened to the schoolgirls, you know? But it means even little kids, you know, even primary school kids will know. And if you don't, well, you're an idiot. It makes you feel stupid. So the every schoolboy knows fallacy. That is it's quite a long name, but that is one of the names. And as I say, some of these have got other names, but that's the most common. I'll try to just give you the most common one.
So
Yeah.
what's the name of it?
Every schoolboy knows.
Oh.
Yeah. That's the name of it. Yeah.
And is there, like, leaders are born, is that another fallacy statement, or is that goes together?
No, that bit, we could say, as everyone knows, the climate is not changing.
Oh.
You know, we can add any topic there. That last bit is not anything to do with the fallacy. It's just a topic they threw in there. As Jin mentioned, I mean, you guys were focused more on trying to find the fallacy in that topic bit, which didn't really exist, but that is a nature-nurture thing, isn't it? So something's born or not made, like musicians are born or not made, or leaders are nature versus nurture. Nurture being brought up, your environment. But often in psychology, especially, you talk about the nature-nurture debate. Yeah. But that bit isn't related to the fallacy. What was our next one?
So what were you stuck on the first one there?
We had a technical issue for a while, and then we were looking more at that leads not being made. There was focus more on the topic rather than the first bit. Yeah, the manipulation. The key was that manipulative element. So you can see here's a typical fallacy. It hooks your emotions, doesn't it, more than your reason. The other name for it is the bandwagon fallacy. When it comes from the phrase in English, when you're on the bandwagon, you join in with everybody else. So the bandwagon in the United States was, the bandwagon, it's like a wagon going along. It's got a band on it playing and everybody follows it through the village. Right? And you don't want to be left out. It's got all the excitement happening, so you follow it and everybody follows. So when you jump on the bandwagon, the idiom in English, you jump on with everybody else so you don't miss out. So this is also called the bandwagon fallacy. You'll see those two names. It's a shorter name. All right, let's try another one. Anybody else?
So I'll go
Yeah.
number 3.
Yep.
It's this binary fallacy.
Yep.
It's either we raise taxes or the Social Security Fund will go back.
Yes, that's a good way of describing it. Why is it a binary? In what
Because
sense?
you assume there are only two solutions or two ways.
Mm,
But in reality, maybe it's another
Mm.
that way.
true. Yes. Yeah. And look, you could use that term. The other ones are, it's a false binary, isn't it? And that we often hear, oh, that's a false binary. Or there are two other terms, a false dilemma, DILEMMA, a false dilemma. A dilemma is a problem where you don't know quite what to do. Think about the word itself. Die is two, isn't it? Yeah. So two pathways, two alternatives, and you're not sure what to do. You're in a dilemma. The other one is a false dichotomy, and a dichotomy is a difference. So dichotomy is spelled, it's got a tricky bit in the middle. DI, same two idea. Now CH, it's got an H in there. DICHOTOMY, dichotomy. DICHOTOMY. Dichotomy is a split, a big difference with nothing in between. Yeah, so it's got those three titles, and it is exactly that. Like, what's an example in this case? Where could you have had a third alternative? You raise taxes, or the Social Security Fund will, is it the one? Will be bankrupted. What else could we, might be a third alternative, or a fourth or a fifth?
Because normally we raise taxes for the ordinary people, not for the rich.
Yeah,
Yeah.
true. And some other government program could be cut, couldn't it? They could stop building submarines
Yeah.
and transfer the money. So that's a third possibility. And there's many, think how many government programs there are that many alternatives. Yeah. So it's a false dilemma.
Is this been sort of part of oversimplification?
Yeah, it is. That's right. Yeah. I guess oversimplification is a broader, involving lots of other techniques, but this is within that category. Yes, it is. Good point. Another one.
Number 5.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can balance my checkbook, why can the Congress balance the budget?
Yeah.
For me, it just these two there's no connection between these two.
Uh-huh.
It's independent event.
Right.
Shouldn't depend on each other. We cannot compare these two.
Right. And right, can you examine a bit more? You're on the right. Why can't we compare these?
So because these two events, it's not the same. Like balance my checkbook,
Mm.
the balance of budget, different kind of event.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you cannot compare.
Right. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. They're very different things, aren't they? A bit of interference. Okay. Yeah. Something else you wanted to say?
If I can doesn't mean you can. For some reason.
Uh-huh. If they were identical things, there might be some argument. Yeah. But you're right. If one person can, doesn't necessarily mean the other. But the question is, why can't you? If they are the same. But I think your point is, you're right. They're not the same, are they? Yeah.
The scope between these two are different. So the first only, the first part of the sentence just my person, one person thing,
Mm.
and the second one is like the whole Hard one.
more complicated
More
thing,
complex.
Mm.
but
The scope is bigger.
try to
than-
simplify it as a, make it look like the same.
True. Yes, I guess there's an element again of oversimplification in here, isn't there? Yeah, and it's a bit like we sometimes use the more slang term apples and oranges. We can't compare apples and oranges, but the key is it's a false analogy. So an analogy where you compare one thing, you call it a false comparison, but false analogy is the formal term for it. So an analogy is like a comparison between one thing and another. So analogy, I'll just spell it, A-N-A-L-O-G-Y. I'm just spelling out because it's quicker. A-N-A-L-O-G-Y. Very important in the history of thinking, the whole process of analogy. There's a few people who argue that science has moved forward through two main techniques, analogy and generalization. Yeah, where basically you say this new thing is like this old thing, and that helps us understand it. And then this thing is like these other things. So the process of analogy and generalization are basically the steps with which new knowledge is developed. But analogies in science have to be valid. They have to be, one thing has to compare properly to another. It can't be a false one. And as you point out, the level of scale and complexity of your own personal check account compared to a national budget with reserve banks and interest rates and et cetera, import-export issues, they're apples and oranges. They can't be compared. So you are drawing, we use the word draw with an analogy, or you could say make. We're drawing an analogy between one thing and another. You're drawing a false analogy. You're making a false analogy. Yeah. So when, speakers or writers start those sorts of comparisons, have a careful look. Are they comparable or not? Or is there a problem of scale or complexity where it's false? Yeah, good-o. Anything further? We've got, what about number 4? The nuclear plants.
It's appeal to fear.
Yeah, exactly.
The
Correct.
speaker trying to persuade the audience, not providing the concrete evidence, just
Just say what if.
Yeah, that's right. It is an appeal to fear. You can say bye-bye to the whole town. Yeah. So people get terribly alarmed. Again, we need to look at those questions up the top. What is the writer trying to make you feel? Well, afraid. Fear can overwhelm logic. So it can be quite powerful as a technique. Appeal to fear. Yes. Not all analogies, but a lot of them have this appeal to something, appeal to popularity, appeal to common practice, appeal to common belief, appeal to fear, because they are appealing, they're calling. Appeal means to call, right? They're calling on a particular emotion like fear or whatever. So yeah, hence this, sometimes they have a little phrase as a name. This is appeal to fear. Yeah.
But when I see this, also this statement for the nuclear power, not for just nuclear power, but just scientifically, there's a chance there will be some radiation outside the plant.
Yes.
So But so in this case, so we.
Oh, you
we
mean there's a validity in what the person is saying?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. What are they actually? If the plutonium falls into the wrong hand.
fall into the wrong hand.
Yes.
okay, good.
Yeah.
But scientifically, there was radiation in the nuclear plants.
Yes.
So so some green will say we shouldn't have.
Indeed. Yes. Yes. And look, there are
So
more
so-
than one valid reason why we shouldn't have nuclear power. Yes.
So
Yeah.
for the green, they use this kind of, they try to make people fear about
Yeah.
radiation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. So I guess the question is, are they, so there can be reasonably based fear, can't there? Like we've seen Chernobyl, for example, you know, or Fukushima, you know. So there are scientifically valid reasons why we, you know, some people would argue we have to be concerned or afraid. Yeah. The question is, if in terms of fallacy, are there several well laid out steps, and not the emphasis on the fear itself, but the emphasis on the facts, right, and the evidence, and then if the result is, well, I don't know, that's a kind of scary thing. But here, you know, in a quick, you can say bye-bye to the whole city, and they haven't really explained, you know, exactly how. You can see their emphasis is on emotional manipulation, not presenting all those details and steps. So sure, logical arguments can appeal, can involve in the final analysis an emotional response to the conclusion, can't they? We can look at a science, look, for example, climate change. Pretty solid science now shows that we could be at, you know, 3, 4, 5 degrees of warming by the end of the century. Now that's a bloody scary thing, right? But that doesn't mean that scientists are engaged in appealing to fear. We can, again, we'll have an emotional response possibly to the conclusion, but it doesn't mean that the argument itself is fallacious. However, opponents will say about, you know, especially on the right, we often hear, oh, scientists, they're just scaremongering. And that word mongering means to make or stir up negative. Warmongering, scaremongering, M-O-N-G, not M-U, sounds like a, but it's an O spell. Scaremongering, all one word. Warmongering, stirring up war, stirring up fear. So anybody who's using appeal to fear, I guess we could say, oh, that's also scaremongering. M-O-N-G-E-R. It's an old English word. In old stories, the fishmonger. This was the person who sold fish and like caught them and prepared them and sold them. That was the fishmonger. But then in more modern times, the last century, we've invented warmonger and scaremonger. More modern uses of the word. Rumourmonger. You can see they're all negative. Good. So that's the appeal to fear. Okay. We had one more at least, did we? Yeah, number 6. Oh, number 2 and 6. All right. Which one do you want to tackle?
So the number 2 tries to convince people that English courses are useless for students.
Yes, sorry, Daniel, just have a look. Number 2. Students
Number 2.
could focus on their courses in their major if all these useless English courses were cancelled. Yeah. Thoughts on that one? Can you repeat your idea, Sophia?
Tries to convince the readers that English courses are useless, or there's the reason why students couldn't focus in their major.
Yeah, any other, yeah, you're on the right track, I think. What are other thoughts on that one?
Or maybe there are more other useless courses instead of
Yeah,
English
yeah,
courses.
true, quite possibly, isn't it? Yes.
And maybe some English are useless, but not all of them are
No.
useless.
Yeah, right. So there's overgeneralization in there possibly. And also just the term useless.
Yeah, and how did you prove English course is useless?
Yes, yes. That's right. There's no development of that. It's a label. So it's what you call a loaded word. So loaded words are either words, it's an unnecessary word that you put in to emotionally manipulate. It could be a very positive word, probably more often negative, doesn't have to be, to make people, be repelled by or not like the thing. Yeah, so just the placement of unnecessary, emotionally laden is the word. Laden from load. So a fully laden thing means fully loaded up. So it's got all this metaphor of loading, like packing on top of something, emotional elements that don't need to be there. Yeah, we could take the word out and it's got a lot less emotional significance, hasn't it? So they're just trying to load up emotions in a certain direction there. It's it's one of the most common strategies and techniques, of course, is loading up.
You put a lot of adjective,
Yeah.
big words.
Yes, exactly. Usually
Some
adjectives.
title.
It's not always just adjectives, because some nouns can just be positive in themselves, can't they? Like inspiration, right? It's a noun, but it's a positive thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be adjectives, but it can be nouns or verbs or, all sorts of different grammatical methods. Yeah. Watch most ads.
Title.
Yeah, titles, the descriptions, there's so many loaded words. And that's what's interesting about Gruen, that program I'm talking about. When we criticize a text and pull it apart, one common word is we deconstruct it. So, for example, a bit of advertising, it's usually been weeks in the making, the designing, the thinking, it's constructed. And then the critique of it is deconstructing, unpacking it. And as we unpack, we see the emotional tricks, and some of them are just linguistic. Many of them are visual, some of them are auditory, certain music, etc. But, linguistically, we can deconstruct it. And one thing to be looking for is loaded words or whole phrases. What are they doing? How are they working on us? So critical thinking is not just about learning logic. It's also learning kind of the opposite, how the feelings are getting manipulated through trickier kind of logic. Yeah. And we had number 6.
So, sorry, what's the actual name?
Loaded words. Loaded words fallacy. Yeah. And 6, playing sports makes people more aggressive. Look at those fights at the bowling alley. Yeah.
So just overgeneralization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Taking one.
Yeah, lots of reasons they fight in the street, but not sports. Maybe just one of them.
Yeah, that's right. There could be multiple reasons, couldn't there? And the person is taking their own personal experience only. We often call it hasty generalization. So hasty, it does involve overgeneralizing, but it's also often called hasty. Hasty means you're doing something too quickly, H-A-S-T-Y. So the word haste, you may know, like somebody in haste, rushing. So a hasty generalization, so very quickly on the basis of a very small amount of evidence, you jump to a general conclusion. The other thing you can call this is anecdotal evidence. Anecdote means a true story. So anecdote, A-N-E-C-D-O-T-E, A-N-E-C-D-O-T-E. Anecdotal, the adjective, A-L instead of the E, anecdotal. So you've got anecdote, noun, anecdotal. And the collocation, the little phrase, anecdotal evidence. So it involves both of the, and usually, well, anecdotal evidence involves a hasty generalization, because anecdotal evidence is like from one story. You know, oh, my grandpappy, he smoked cigars until he was 96. You know, so clearly smoking doesn't cause lung cancer, you know. And he died when he stepped in front of a bus, you know, so with a cigar. So yeah, again, we're kind of packing two. This is an interesting point. You can have two fallacies in one sometimes. If you're really clever and creative, you can be illogical several ways at once. So you've got an anecdotal element, anecdotal evidence, and hasty generalization. Anecdotal evidence will always be part of hasty generalization.
So clearly we need to ban buses.
Indeed. I like that jump. And have mountain bikes instead.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. So those are the first half dozen. So we're kind of out of time, but you've got the idea. So have a look, have a read of the next half dozen, and next week we'll start by jumping into those. And they might be repeats. I'm not sure if there are. I think it's trying to introduce you to different ones. But again, you don't have to come up with a name, but pretty clearly sharp enough there to come up with getting close or on the answer, as it were. Yeah. So we'll do, you know, a few of these and just slowly build up a bit of a toolbox. And as I say, I think if you have the names of some of these, appeal to fear, false analogy, anecdotal evidence, hasty generalization, these kind of things, if we have the name, we have the concept kind of clearer, and you'll detect them more often, more readily, I think, if you have that kind of cognitive package of the idea plus the linguistic title. Yeah. So I think one thing to do is keep, once you've recognized these or learnt them, you know, the key is, yeah, start listening, and especially on social media, you know, you'll see these things come up a lot in conversations. They appear a lot. As we get more academic, we're meant to have less and less of these, but occasionally you do come across, I've seen it, heard it, you know, professors being interviewed, and they'll slip into one of these.
Politicians do.
Oh, politicians do it all the time, all the time. I mean, look, this one point to make is that, okay, in politics, you're involved with a mass audience, aren't you? So where is your target audience? How critical are they? And a politician is pretty much like a marketer or a public relations person. They are going to target, if they're clever, they're going to target emotions, not the logic. You know, as a general rule, that I think there's a difference between right and left here as well. The right-wing it's not an accident, but think about the very emotional politicians we've seen in the last few years. Trump, Bolsonaro, Duterte, Philippines guy. I'm picking the very populist figures. Boris Johnson, etc. You know, the far right figures. And people like Clive Palmer, Pauline Hanson, etc. The famous one in Australia, Joe Bjelke-Peterson, back in the 70s. They purposely, it's part of their strategy. They target the emotions, and they will use a lot of this fallacious reasoning because it's much, much more successful than talking logically, and people get bored with listening to some,
Especially if you don't talk to academics, like if you just
yeah,
general population with whose maybe education is not that high in critical thinking, pick
Yeah.
up on these things a lot easier.
absolutely,
than
yeah.
saying
So I think we
heavy
should,
words.
teachers should teach this kind of fallacy when we was a kid. Like
I think so. I think you're right,
maybe
Denny.
year one,
Yeah,
year
yeah.
two.
I think you're right. And look, I have tutored some young kids in primary school and done this work with them, and they get this stuff,
Yeah.
and yeah, they're off to a bit of a head start, because I mean, I learned it probably in my 40s, to put names to this stuff. And yeah, it'd obviously benefit everybody if we all learned it a lot earlier.
So the Australia include this in curriculum.
The Australian curriculum, no, not explicitly like this. There are some people working on it. Peter Ellerton is an interesting guy, Ellerton. And look, I'll show you maybe next week. He's got a couple of websites. He's a Queensland guy, and he's working with, he's interested in critical thinking in schools. And there are a few people who are trying to inject this more and more into schools. It's not actually at the level of the national curriculum, but they're trying to get that content into the school, which is a great idea. One curriculum that does have it is the European curriculum.
I know France, they do that.
Right. Yeah, they have a subject that is compulsory at
every
whatever you
student.
choose. Yeah, called the theory of knowledge. And to get your what do they call it here? If you go and do your baccalaureate here, what is it called? Just had a blank. The IB, the International Baccalaureate. So that is the European year 12. And they have a compulsory subject called Theory of Knowledge, and it's critical thinking, philosophy, history of the development of knowledge. It's a great course. And there are textbooks available that you can buy around those theory of knowledge, several textbooks for it. You get one of those and have a read, you'll get a lot of this sort of stuff, but a lot more as well. So yeah, the European kids get this, but Americans, Australians and other countries, as far as I'm aware, no. But if you're in an IB school in Australia, for example, Glenunga High, or there's a few schools, a few different ones. Underdale, I think, teaches the IB, and some of the private schools. Then at year 12, yes, you will get it. So yeah, it's an important thing to be getting into out there in the population. Yeah. But those politicians are, actively kind of trained to, or train themselves to appeal to emotion, and stir up that emotional stuff and get the votes. So yeah, you do see a lot of it at election time. And some books, there's a good book, it's called How to Win Every Argument, and it goes through these fallacies by, what's his last name? Piri, Mazdon Piri, I think it is. And what he does is an interesting thing. He will show you these fallacies, then explain them. And then what he says is, if you want to learn how to manipulate people with this, then use it this way. So it's quite evil, really. And that is another, a dark side of fallacies. Once you learn them, you can, if you want, consciously use them on people, and become a more powerful populist arguer. So don't press that button. All right, on that dark note, we'll leave the session for the day. I hope that was interesting for you, and sorry about the recording of the first bit, but I think that last hour was hopefully useful for you. All right, we'll start there again, and next week we'll do maybe a bit of Media Watch and possibly a bit of Gruen. Possibly do a bit of that other ABC thing I was talking about, the Larrikin, the quarterly essay interview, isn't it? Yeah. All right. See you next time.
Hi, John. Thank you for this session. How can I join the Facebook?
Maggie, what I'll do, all right, if you just stay online, I'll just send you the group Facebook thing right now. Here it is. There we go, Maggie. That's
Okay.
the, yeah. We're just throwing in $5. It's a bit like Hillsong Church. It just helps pay the rent here and helps the meetup on the Zoom fees and stuff. So thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, Maggie and E.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, hope to see you again.
Yeah, it's very helpful and informative. Thank you.
No worries. All right, we'll catch you next week, Maggie.
Okay, see you. Thank you.
See ya. Bye.